Maybe you've heard it. Maybe you've even said to yourself in the quiet moments when nobody's watching, if I really forgave them, I will let them back in. And somewhere deep inside, a part of you has been carrying that like a stone in your chest, wondering if the distance you chose makes you a bad person, wondering if protecting your peace somehow makes you guilty. I want you to take a deep breath right now with me. Because what I'm about to share with you might be the very thing you needed to hear for a very, very long time. People always say, if you truly forgave them, you let them back into your life. And for the longest time, I believed that. I thought forgiveness meant picking up the phone, showing up at family dinners, pretending everything was okay, going back to the same table that hurt me and smiling through it. But here's what nobody told me. Forgiveness and access are not the same thing. You could forgive someone completely from the deepest part of your heart and still choose to have them in your life. You can wish someone well and still not answer their calls. You can release the anger, the pain, the bitterness, and still maintain no contact. I know this because that is exactly where I am right now. I forgave my family of origin. I am still no contact with some of them, and I am low contact with some of them. And today I want to talk about why, not to justify myself to anyone, but because I know there are people watching this right now carrying guilt about the same thing, who forgave someone and still feels like they're doing something wrong by protecting their peace. You're not doing anything wrong, my friends. All right, my friends, I want you to get comfortable, sit back because we are going deep today. Before I tell you my story, I want to make sure we are all working with the same definition because the word forgiveness gets so twisted, especially in families of origin. What if I told you that everything you were taught about forgiveness was only half the picture? A lot of us were raised to believe that forgiveness means going back to how things were, giving someone another chance, proving that you're the bigger person, keeping the peace at your own expense. Real forgiveness isn't a phone call. It's showing up at a table that hurt you and pretending the food doesn't taste like pain. It is shrinking yourself back into the shape that kept everyone else comfortable. Real forgiveness happens here, inside, quietly, privately, between you and your own nervous system. It's the moment you stop letting what happened live rent free in your body. And here's what changes everything. You can release someone from the grip of your anger and still not open the door. You can wish someone well with your whole heart and still not answer the phone. You can be completely, genuinely free and still have a boundary that protects that freedom. Those things are not contradictions. They can both be true at the same time. Think about it this way. Imagine someone breaks into your house and steals from you. You can forgive that person and still change locks. Forgiving them doesn't mean you hand them a copy of the new key. That is what no contact became for me. I changed the locks. Not about punishment. It's not from hatred. It's a boundary built to protect my peace. You do not need to destroy your own boundaries in order to prove forgiveness. I'm going to be vulnerable with you because that's the only way this conversation means anything. I want you to imagine something for a moment. Imagine what it feels like to walk into a room and already be bracing before a word is even spoken, before anything even happens. Your shoulders are already up. Your jaw is already tight. Some part of you is already calculating. How do I get through this without losing myself? That was me for years. Growing up, there were emotionally unhealthy dynamics in my family system that deeply affected me. Patterns that slowly taught me that your feelings don't matter. Keeping the peace matters more than your truth. And you begin shrinking yourself to maintain connection. For years, I stayed connected because I thought loyalty meant enduring everything. But nobody ever asked what happens with relationships repeatedly cost you your peace. What happens when your nervous system no longer feel emotionally safe? I stayed at that table long past the point where I should have listened to myself. And every time I stayed, I told myself I was being loyal. But eventually, I realized something painful. I wasn't practicing forgiveness. I was practicing self-abandonment, and those are not the same thing. The decision didn't arrive with a dramatic moment. There were no explosions, no final fight. It was actually very quiet. it was me sitting alone, finally honest with myself, finally willing to stop arguing against what I already knew. And what I knew was this: something in me did not feel safe there. Not unsafe like danger, unsafe like I cannot be fully myself here. I cannot fully breathe here. I cannot grow here without constantly shrinking back. And when I got really honest, I wasn't afraid of losing them. I was afraid of losing myself. So I want to say this clearly about what no contact actually was for me. Going no contact was not a rage decision. It was not a punishment I handed them. It was a gift I finally gave to myself. And I also want to say something important here. Not every relationship in a family system is the same. That is why I chose low contact with some instead of full no contact. I love my family. I will always will. But I'm also mindful about protecting my healing, my emotional well-being, and my mental health. I want people to hear this because healing is nuance. You're allowed to make different choices for different relationships. When I sat with myself honestly, I asked, is this relationship helping me grow, or is it dysregulating my nervous system? My honest answer was, it was costing me my peace. I was anxious before every interaction. I was emotionally exhausted afterwards. I was walking on eggshells. I was managing everyone else's emotions while completely abandoning my own. And eventually I realized no contact wasn't giving up on them. It was me finally choosing myself. That part surprised me. I did not forgive first and then create distance. I created distance first. And in that quiet with less emotional noise around me, I was finally able to heal. Because honestly, it is very hard to heal while you're still actively dysregulated by the same patterns. The distance gave me space to breathe. And in that breathing room, I began understanding things I had never understood before. Generational trauma, dysfunctional family roles, emotional conditioning, and why some people repeat relational harm without even realizing it. That understanding did not expose the pain, but it helped me stop internalizing it as proof I was unworthy. And slowly the anger softened. Not overnight. It wasn't perfect at all. It was not linearly, because healing isn't linear, but it did soften. And I stopped replaying old conversations. I stopped carrying the weight of everyone's opinions about me, and I stopped needing people to fully understand my healing in order to continue it. And that is what forgiveness felt like for me. Not reconciliation, but lightness. Now, I want to speak directly to you for a moment. Not the version of you watching this video, but the version of you that judged the most. The one who stayed too long, who left too late, who said the wrong thing, who went quiet when you should have spoken, who spoke when you should have gone quiet, who chose survival because survival was all you knew how to do at that time. I want you to really, really hear this. That person was not failing. That person was fighting. They were fighting with the tools they had, with the awareness that they had, with the emotional capacity that was available to them at that exact moment in time. You cannot heal from a wound you haven't been taught to see yet. And so you did what any human does. You adapted, you coped, you survived. And now you're here watching this, seeking this, which means something in you is already healing. In my own healing, I also had to face something uncomfortable. I made mistakes too, not just in relationships, not just by staying too long in an emotionally unhealthy dynamics. I mean mistakes in life in general. I'm not sitting here pretending I handled everything perfectly, because I didn't. There were times that I ignored my intuition, times I settled, times I abandoned myself, times I reacted from pain instead of healing. Times I stayed quiet when I should have spoken. Times I spoke from hurt. Times I chose survival over self-respect, because survival was all I knew at that time. And honestly, I carried so much shame of that for years. But healing taught me something life-changing. I was doing the best I could with the awareness, the emotional capacity, and the tools I had at that point in my life. And I want you to hear this too. You are doing the best you could with the awareness, the emotional capacity, and the tools you had at that time of your life. That realization softened something inside of me. Because so many of us look back at older versions of ourselves with judgment instead of compassion. We punish ourselves for not knowing sooner. We punish ourselves for not leaving sooner, for not healing sooner, for not choosing differently sooner. But that version of you was not weak. That version of you was surviving. And part of your healing is learning to stop hating yourself for the ways you once tried to survive pain. The ways you tried to survive confusion, rejection, loneliness, and emotional chaos. That is where self-forgiveness begins. Not in pretending you were perfect, but in finally loving yourself enough to stop condemning who you had to be in order to make it through. Self-forgiveness isn't deciding you are right. It's deciding that you are human, and that human deserves compassion, especially from you. One of the biggest lessons healing has taught me is this: healing is not linear, it is a spiral up. You revisit the same wounds, but you're not the same person anymore. You revisit abandonment with more awareness. You revisit people pleasing with stronger boundaries. You revisit grief with more nervous system capacity. That is growth, not perfection. That is awareness. And I think so many people shame themselves when another layer surfaces. But another layer surfacing does not mean you failed. It often means your nervous system finally feels safe enough to process something deeper. That is not regression, my friends. That is trust. Your body's trusting that you can handle what you couldn't before. People say things like, but they're your family. And yes, they are. But my feelings belong to me. My healing belongs to me. People say you'll regret it. People say you'll regret it one day. And what I know is this: what I would regret more is spending the rest of my life abandoning myself, trying to maintain relationships that repeatedly harmed my peace. People say, have you tried talking about it? And sometimes those conversations have already happened many times. Some people are simply not capable of meeting you where you are emotionally, and that's painful, but it is very real. Forgiveness does not always mean moving forward together. I release the bitterness and I continue my life in peace. Sometimes that is exactly what forgiveness looks like. So if you're sitting with guilt right now about the distance you've created from emotionally unhealthy dynamics, I want you to feel something shift. Because protecting your peace is not betrayal. Healing yourself is not abandonment. And choosing a life that your nervous system can actually sustain is not something you ever have to apologize for. Imagine just for a moment a version of yourself, maybe 6 months from now, who woke up this morning without dread sitting in their chest, who moved through their day without managing everyone else's emotions, who chose themselves not out of selfishness, but out of deep, quiet love for who they are becoming. That version of you is not a fantasy. That version of you is where this path leads. And it starts right here, with exactly what you're doing right now. You are not a bad person for protecting your peace. You are allowed to love people from a distance. You are allowed to stop abandoning yourself. And you are allowed to build a life that feels emotionally safe, emotionally grounded, peaceful, and honest. Because healing is not becoming perfect. Healing is becoming truthful. Truthful about what hurts you, what heals you, what no longer feels healthy, and actually sustain. And maybe the deepest healing of all is finally choosing yourself without hatred in your heart. If this video spoke to you today, let me know in the comments, what is one thing you're learning to forgive yourself for? And if nobody has told you this lately, your peace matters too. I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.